What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and I always talk about target share, targets per out run. I am a target share truther or a target share believer, but I've never really explained to you guys why I like target share so much. So today we're going to be getting into why targets are king, and then go over 3 must-draft wide receivers that are target hogs and look good in those metrics like target share and targets per out run. So with that being said, if you enjoyed the video at any point in time, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty bag.
So when we talk about targets and why targets are king, let's break down from a wide receiver standpoint what a wide receiver is doing on a pass play. You have the route, right? So the opportunity, the coach says, okay, go out there, run a route. You have the ability to get open and command the target, which is a skill. And then you have after the catch efficiency. So you have ADOT, yards after catch, yards per out run, touchdowns, all of that. And the reason why I think targets and target share is the gold standard for wide receivers, because routes don't indicate skill. For instance, we've seen Marvin Jones, we've seen Robbie Anderson, 2 guys in the top 10 in routes run last year. Again, routes aren't really earned. They're just given to the starting wide receivers. And then from there, you earn the target. Now, also we have the after the catch stuff. So yards per catch, yards per out run, yards after catch, touchdowns. So the stickiest part of that whole equation and displays the most talent is targets. And this is a great chart kind of illustrating that on RotoViz from a article titled "Targets are like pouring gasoline on the flame of talent," and it shows the relationship between targets and wide receiver PPR finish. And if we follow the trend line, we can get a pretty good idea of how targets reflect wide receiver finishes. So about 140 plus targets will be a top 12 finish. 160 plus targets get you into the top 12. Now, of course, there are outliers. You can have 120 targets but 15 touchdowns and be a top 12 guy, but that's such a random event, right? Touchdowns aren't sticky. They're random year to year. We can't really bank on a guy getting into the top 12 on touchdowns alone. How do we take previous year's targets and project them moving forward? And the issue is when we look at raw targets or targets per game or any of those metrics that don't really take into account market share, that's where we get in trouble a little bit, because year to year, team volume can have massive swings. And this is a great chart by @ANelytics on Twitter, showing how volatile year to year pass attempts per game can be. If you just look across the board, teams are changing constantly how many pass attempts per game they're running out there. It's very difficult. There's a lot of turnover in the NFL. A lot of head coaches are changing hands. A lot of players are changing hands. Things change a lot in the NFL. So chasing raw targets is like chasing a moving target. We want to kind of eliminate as much noise as possible. As you guys can see from this chart, there's a lot of noise there. So to adjust for that, we have target share, which is our next best bet. And this is kind of me just taking you guys through the process of these target market share type stats and why they're so important. And target share on a per game basis is great. It's stickier year to year than even points per game. It has a 0.48 R squared according to Peter Howard's database, which was better than point per game, which I believe was like a 0.43. So year to year, it's sticky. Target share is great, but I think it has one flaw, and it doesn't adjust for snap share. It doesn't adjust for being on the field. You can have a 50% snap share and really be underrepresented, where we have 2 guys last year. If you just look at target share, you would believe that Gabriel Davis and Bryan Edwards would be about the same when it comes to commanding targets. They both had a 10% target share. This is the issue. Gabriel Davis played under 50% of his team snaps. Bryan Edwards played over 75% of his team snaps. And this is why I've even started leaning towards target per out run, because when we look at targets per out run, we can see Bryan Edwards was a 10.9% guy in targets per out run, but Gabriel Davis was an 18% guy. So that now shows us the context of Gabriel Davis not running a starter's number of routes, right? It breaks it down to a per route basis so we can sort of eliminate as much noise as possible. And Ben Gretsch talked about it in a recent Substack article, I would call it, or whatever. He has like an email list where he sort of types away these really long rants about really cool stats. And he said that he loves targets per out run because it sort of just controls for target earning ability first. And you can just sort of set a baseline across all players on an equal playing field per route and just see what the answer is to the most important element of the equation of routes, targets, after the catch efficiency. We have a direct line in there. How good is this player at earning targets? So with all this being said, this all outlined, this is why I love looking at target share, why I love looking at targets per out run. And from there, we're going to talk about some guys who popped in targets per out run and why I like them in 2022. And at the top, we have DJ Moore, who's going at the 308 as the wide receiver 15. And a little part of me also wanted to talk about him because of the Baker news, and I had a lot of people requesting that I sort of go over how I feel about DJ Moore at this point in time. And DJ Moore is the definition of a target hog. He was 5th in target share last year at 28.4%, only behind Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, and Deontay Johnson. A little bit lower in targets per out run, only a 25.1% guy, but still wide receiver 11. Small drop, still elite numbers, ahead of guys like Deebo Samuel, ahead of guys like Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, who are all going ahead of him this year in redraft. And we look at DJ Moore, what he did last year. Another disappointing year. 14 points per game, was the wide receiver 23 in points per game, only had 4 touchdowns again. Now, I want to address that touchdown point. I think it's really overblown, DJ Moore's inability to score touchdowns. The last 3 years, this is the output of passing touchdowns across all of the quarterbacks. You have 14 touchdowns, 31st in the NFL, 16 touchdowns, 28th in the NFL, 17 touchdowns, 31st in the NFL. The last 3 years, he's been in a bottom 5 offense from a passing touchdown perspective, not even cracking 20. Like, these are Geno Smith, Sam Darnold level numbers at quarterback. So when there's not even a big pie to begin with, it's hard to be like, how come this guy hasn't scored 10 touchdowns? Because he hasn't been in an offense where he can command that much of the targets. 4 touchdowns on a 16 touchdown team isn't bad. It's like 25% share of the touchdowns. If it was like a 25 to 30 touchdown quarterback, he'd be in that 6 to 8 touchdown range. So it's really not a product of DJ Moore. It's a product of how bad his quarterbacks have been thus far, which gets us to Baker Mayfield, who doesn't get enough credit for how good he is in terms of being a real-life quarterback. And when you look at his career in Cleveland, this is a great chart that I brought up in the must buy and sell trade targets video. When I said go buy Baker Mayfield before he went out and got a starting job, he goes to Carolina. But when we look back at his career with Cleveland, it's pretty clear that he was let down by a situation. When we look across the span of 4 years, he had 3 head coaches with Hugh Jackson, he had Kitchens, he had Stefanski, all of which ran these slow-paced run-first offenses where you guys can see from years 2019 to 2021, 24th in pace of play, 21st, 28th, pass attempts, 28th, 28th, 20th. All of these offenses were these slow run-first offenses outside of 2018 when he was a rookie and he had Todd Haley as his offense coordinator. And that's when he came in, first overall pick, put up 28 passing touchdowns as a true rookie, and he goes out there. He looks great in clean pocket, PFF grade, ranked 14th among all quarterbacks as a true rookie, which is a really good stat in terms of clean pocket PFF passing grade, just because it eliminates all the noise of pressure and all that. Just in a clean pocket, how can you look throwing the football? And another stat I like to look at is big time throws to turnover-worthy plays, which is just a really good measure of does your goods outweigh your bads. And not even in a complete season. Remember, he only played, I want to say, 13, 14 games. He came in for Tyrod Taylor, I believe, on like the Jets-Browns Thursday night game, something like that. He finished the season with 40 big-time throws to 18 turnover-worthy plays. So we talked about this in the quarterback video. Kyler Murray had 45 big-time throws to 12 turnover-worthy plays. It was like one of the best ratios last year. I want to say Brady was like 45 to 16. So 40 to 18 as a true rookie is wild. Another guy to sort of give some perspective, this year, Burrow was only a 35 and 15 guy. Really crazy numbers. So I'm extremely certain, even though that's just his rookie season, I'm very certain that he's at the very least a competent starter in the NFL. The rest of his career has been plagued by injuries, bad play calling, but even if you want to look at year 3, he showed he was still a good quarterback. He was a fine big-time throw to turnover-worthy play guy at a 31 to 17 ratio, and he was the QB10 in clean passing grade with a 91.2. He should also help DJ Moore in the touchdown department, where outside of a down 2022, his passing touchdowns have been 26, 22, and 27 as a rookie. I know I said earlier 28 as a rookie, 27 as a rookie, which I want to say was like almost the record at that point. So 27 passing touchdowns as a rookie, wasn't even in a full season. 22 the year after that, 26 the year after that. So those are all passing touchdowns that are more than what DJ Moore has done in the past 3 years, or just DJ Moore's offenses have done in the past 3 years. So when we zoom out, we have DJ Moore, who is a known target hog. He gets a big quarterback upgrade, and that's great. But the passing offense or passing environment last year in Carolina was bad. They ranked 25th in neutral pass rate, and this is where the silver lining of Ben McAdoo comes into play. Ben McAdoo, Giants coach from 2014 to 2015 as the offense coordinator, and then I want to say 2016 to 2017 as the head coach. Awful time there. Isn't a great head coach, but at the very least, he was 12th in neutral pass rate during that span, and we can see this change of philosophy in Mike Clay's projections. He has Carolina with the 5th most dropbacks and 11th most attempts in 2022. And I guess that also factors in just negative game scripts, them being a bad team. So again, we have DJ Moore, who becomes really interesting, where he gets a new passing environment that's going to throw the ball more. He has a quarterback that can actually throw touchdowns and be efficient. He commands targets, and yet his ADP has barely budged. I looked back at what his ADP was before Baker Mayfield got traded to the Panthers, and it was only 6 picks later than what he goes now. He's only been moved up half a round. He's still just a mid-third round pick, and that's perfect. That's exactly where I'll take him. Right after those, Javonte Williams, Nick Chubbs, Leonard Fournette are off the board. I think DJ Moore becomes very interesting as early as the middle to early third. And we're going to kind of break this video up into like DJ Moore's going to be our early guy, and then we're going to talk about a mid-round guy with Kadarius Toney, who's going at the 801 as the wide receiver 42. And then after this, we'll get into like a late round wide receiver. But with Kadarius Toney, once we get to these middle rounds, I want nothing but upside swings at wide receiver. And Toney is the perfect archetype of that, because when we zoom in on a per round basis, he popped everywhere. Last year, among all wide receivers, this is a crazy stat, among all wide receivers, he was tied for 5th in targets per out run. So he had a better targets per out run than DJ Moore, who we just talked about, at a 27.04% clip. So I'll just say 27%. But he was tied with Deontay Johnson, and he was only behind Antonio Brown, who was actually really good last year. People don't understand. Antonio Brown's insane. But in terms of like PFF receiving grade, targets per out run, all of that, he still looked like a top 5 to 10 wide receiver last year. But we had Antonio Brown, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, the only 4 wide receivers ahead of Kadarius Toney in targets per out run. He showed to be an absolute target hog when he was on the field, when he was healthy, and we saw that really come to fruition in Week 5 against the Cowboys. I'm still blown away by this game log. He had a 58.7% snap share, but he put up 13 targets, 10 catches, 189 yards on only 23 routes. 13 targets on 23 routes in that game against the Cowboys is over a 50% targets per out run. That's insane. Like an elite number is 30%. He did over 50% in that game, had 29.6 PPR points, like the wide receiver 5 that week, without a single touchdown. Crazy. I genuinely, that is one of the most impressive box scores out there for only a 58% snap share, only 23 routes. He put up a top 5 fantasy scoring week without a single touchdown, 189 yards, 10 catches. Really, really good. Now, again, this is as a rookie. He showed the ability to command targets, and that's really promising because we know year 2 guys take a jump. He also looked good from an efficiency standpoint, and he looked good in yards per out run, where he had a 2.14 yards per out run, 13th in the NFL, so he's efficient on his targets. And that 2.14 yards per out run number was best for second among all rookies last season, behind only Jamar Chase, and 8th best over the last 10 seasons among rookie wide receivers. The only guys ahead of him, Martavis Bryant, that's a tough one, but Odell, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Juju, Kadarius Toney. So he has this really strong foundation heading into year 2, where we have the ability to earn targets, the ability to be efficient on those targets, and now we get year 2, where we know rookie wide receivers take a big jump, and then you have a lot of turnover on this Giants team, where you have Brian Dable coming in there, who's going to inject a lot more modern offensive concepts into that offense than what Jason Garrett was doing before that. When we look at Brian Dable, he is really hung up on using his weapons to the best of their ability. And this is a great tweet where Brian Dable said he went back and watched a lot of film of Kenny Golladay with the Lions and Kadarius Toney at Florida to figure out how to best use them. He said he'll take input from them on what sort of routes they like to run too. I love this, man. I love a coach who doesn't want to just shoehorn Kadarius Toney into the role that he sees for him. He's not only watching tape from when Kadarius Toney was balling out at Florida, but he's asking him, what kind of routes do you want to run? Where do you see yourself in this offense? Taking input from these players. That is amazing. You could not ask for anything else from an offensive coordinator or a play caller. Go out there, use your players to the best of their ability. Don't try and put a round peg in a square hole. And that makes me believe that Dable is going to use Toney in a very modern way, in a lot of fun ways, and a lot of scheme touches out of the slot. And this offense should be one of the league leaders in neutral pass rate, like we've seen with Brian Dable with the Bills. And there's going to be a lot of pre-snap motion. There's going to be a lot of 3 to 4 wide receiver sets. Again, a lot of modern concepts they haven't seen the last 2 years. So I love this price, where we have a lot of momentum for him as this upside swing in round 8, where I truly do feel it wouldn't shock me at all if we saw a year 2 Tyreek Hill type blow up for Kadarius Toney. He has all of these factors in there that show that he has a ton of talent. It really just is, the off the field stuff, the injury stuff. That's why this is an upside swing. But again, in round 8, when we probably have 4 or 5 wide receivers by then, this is all I'm really looking for. It's just absolute home run swings. Kadarius Toney is that. Per route data for Kadarius Toney is really, really promising. So I'm completely cool with Kadarius Toney as a round 8 guy. I have a ton of exposure to him. I want to say 15% exposure. So Kadarius Toney is a guy who I'm taking swings at all the time. Now we're going to talk about the late round wide receiver, the unsexy one, Jarvis Landry, going at the 1201 is the wide receiver 60. And again, this one isn't sexy, but I think that he's an absolutely fine pick in the double-digit rounds. And he's a little bit different from Kadarius Toney, where he's not as much of an upside swing, but I do just think that he is mispriced. Landry wasn't great last year on the Browns, like a banged-up Baker Mayfield. The whole offense wasn't great, but he still finished as the wide receiver 34 in points per game with only 2 touchdowns. He had some injuries pile up. He didn't play like over 12 games, but still, wide receiver 34 in points per game. He's going at wide receiver 60, and he still commanded targets last year. Again, this whole video, the theme of it is target hogs. He had a 24.6% target per out run, 14th among all wide receivers. Again, this is a wide receiver 60 price tag we're buying him at. Now, don't take this the wrong way, but he is kind of like a poor man's Keenan Allen at this point. And this is a tweet of mine where I put them up side by side, just a blind resume, player A versus player B. And their yards per out run is identical. Jarvis Landry beats him out in targets per out run, and they have about the same ADOT and slot percentage. Now, obviously, Keenan Allen was like a top 10 wide receiver last year, while Jarvis was a wide receiver 3, but their usage and their role is eerily similar. And on top of that, they were about the same from an efficiency standpoint. So it's not so much to drag Keenan Allen, but just to say, if Jarvis Landry didn't have injuries last year, and if he was on an offense that threw the ball more, and, he wasn't missing a bunch of games, he only had 2 touchdowns, he probably would have been a little bit better last year than wide receiver 34. Now, again, wide receiver 60 price tag. He goes to the Saints this year. And I think people sort of overlook how important the slot role is on a team with Jameis, where we've seen Jameis Winston air it out on Tampa, but we've also seen him not only air it out to Mike Evans and those guys, but he made Chris Godwin a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy in Tampa Bay, just targeting him in the slot. So I think in this New Orleans offense with Jameis Winston, that slot Godwin type role is Jarvis Landry's to lose early on. You have Chris Olave who's going to play on the perimeter. You have Michael Thomas, who is a slot guy, but at this point, as much as I love Michael Thomas, the reports are bad. He's already on the pup. There's reports out there that he can't even put pressure on his foot right now. We really don't know until Michael Thomas steps on a field or gets taken off one of these pup lists or anything. I'm not really taking him into account when it comes to Jarvis Landry's bull case for 2022. Now, again, Jarvis doesn't really have game-breaking upside, but he's a known commodity. He's still commanding targets. He's about as efficient on a yards per out run basis as a Keenan Allen, and he just presents a good opportunity to draft wide receiver 60 is like a wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6 that could pretty easily score, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 type numbers. I think that he is a really, really cheap Tyler Boyd type guy. And I think that is a fine wide receiver to target at this point in the draft, especially if you go 2 running backs, 3 running backs in those first 5 rounds, and you just need some stable assets at wide receiver. Now, that's going to do it for us today. If you guys have any questions about target share or anything else in that targets per out run, target share range of, why I value those stats so much, let me know. I just figured that it would be good to kind of tell you guys why instead of just keep shoving targets per out run and target share down your throats. So let me know how you guys feel about target share, target per out run, all of that good stuff. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Got the juice, I got the juice. Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from misdemeanors. Dreamer.